Cop throws scorpions. On Black Boy, what the father did next, no one believed. Who could have imagined that a simple child's play in a park would turn into a nightmare that would forever change the life of a family in Chicago? Hey folks, before we dive into this incredible story, don't forget to smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell. Drop a comment telling us which city you're watching from, because this story is going to hit you right in the feels. 8-year-old Jamal was playing happily in the Lincoln Park on a sunny Sunday afternoon. His father, Dr. Robert Thompson, a respected university professor, watched his son from afar while chatting with other parents. What no one knew was that this seemingly tranquil afternoon would mark the beginning of a series of events that would reveal the darkest side of human nature. Officer Mike Brennan, known in the neighborhood for his explosive temper and questionable behavior, was patrolling the area. His eyes fixed on Jamal in a disturbing manner. The boy, innocent in his play, didn't notice the danger approaching. Robert noticed something strange in the officer's behavior, the way he followed his son with his gaze like a predator observing its prey. But even his worst nightmares couldn't have predicted what was about to happen. What happened in the next few minutes would leave deep scars, not only on Jamal and his family, but on the entire community. A mysterious box in the officer's hands held a terrible secret, something no one could imagine a human being would be capable of doing to an innocent child. Robert would never forget the sound of his son's scream, a scream that would echo in his nightmares for the next few months, fueling a desire for justice that would transform into something much deeper and darker. But what no one expected was Robert's reaction. How can a father deal with such cruelty against his child? What is the limit between justice and vengeance? The answers to these questions would forever change the fate of all involved. What happened in that park was just the beginning. The real story is in what came after, in the choices a father was forced to make and the consequences no one could have foreseen. Is there justice in a world where those who should protect are the same ones who cause pain? How far can a father go to protect his child? Dr. Robert Thompson, 42, wasn't just an ordinary university professor. With a PhD in chemistry from MIT, he was renowned for his innovative research on natural poisons and antidotes, especially those derived from venomous animals. His wife had passed away during Jamal's birth, making the boy the sole purpose of his life. Jamal had inherited his father's curiosity and his mother's smile. Though an introverted child, he had a contagious passion for insects and small animals. At 8 years old, he already maintained a small terrarium in his room, where he observed and catalogued different ant species, a hobby his father encouraged, seeing in it the awakening of a future scientist. Lincoln Park, where everything happened, was more than just a recreational area. It was a meeting point for different social classes in Chicago, where the tensions of social inequality became evident in the subtle glances and gestures of the frequenters. Officer Mike Brennan, 38, carried a dark history that few knew. The son of a former police chief known for violent methods, he grew up believing that force was the only language the world understood. His violent actions were often covered up by fellow officers, creating a sense of impunity that fueled his increasingly brazen behavior. At the precinct, Brennan was feared even by his own colleagues. His brutal methods were justified by a supposed love for order, but they hid deep-rooted prejudice that manifested mainly against black and poor people. He had a history of complaints for abuse of authority, all mysteriously archived. Maria Johnson, a 65-year-old hot dog vendor in the park, was a silent witness to many of Brennan's atrocities. She knew every corner of that park and every story that unfolded there. It was she who first noticed something strange that afternoon when she saw the officer carrying a cardboard box with small holes, something he had never done before. Dr. Sarah Lee, an emergency room physician at Northwestern Memorial Hospital and a close friend of Robert, would be a key player in the events that would follow. An expert in accidents with venomous animals, she knew the treatment protocols well and, more importantly, could identify when an accident wasn't really an accident. The scenario was completed by Captain James Oliveira, an upright man near retirement who had been trying for years to gather evidence against Brennan, but always ran into the protection the officer received from influential superiors. Oliveira saw in Robert a possible key to finally achieving justice, but he couldn't imagine the direction events would take. The Lincoln Park neighborhood, with its typical Chicago contradictions, served as the stage for this plot. On one side, upper-middle-class condominiums where Robert lived with his son. On the other, underprivileged communities that suffered daily from police violence. The park was exactly on the border between these two worlds, like a neutral zone where different universes met. The story that would unfold there wouldn't just be about an act of cruelty against an innocent child, but about how the system that should protect people often turns against them, especially when they are black and vulnerable. It would also be a story about how the search for justice can transform a peaceful man into someone he himself wouldn't recognize. As the sun began to set over Chicago's skyline, casting long shadows across Lincoln Park, the stage was set for a confrontation that would shake the city to its core. Robert, unaware of the full extent of the corruption he was about to uncover, tucked Jamal into bed that night with a sense of unease he couldn't quite shake. In his small bedroom, surrounded by his beloved insect collections, Jamal drifted off to sleep, blissfully unaware that his world was about to change forever. His innocence, like the delicate wings of the butterflies he so admired, was on the verge of being shattered. Meanwhile, in a dimly lit office at the police precinct, Officer Brennan pored over files, a sinister smile playing on his lips. He had no idea that his actions in the park that day had set in motion a chain of events that would expose not just his own misdeeds, but a web of corruption that reached the highest levels of Chicago's power structure. The following day, as Jamal recovered in the hospital, Robert found himself thrust into a world he never imagined existed. Dr. Sarah Lee, examining Jamal's test results, made a startling discovery. "Robert," she whispered, her voice trembling, "these aren't ordinary scorpion stings. The venom, it's been modified." Robert's scientific mind raced. Modified venom meant deliberate engineering, which implied a much larger operation than a single corrupt cop. "Sarah, we need to keep this quiet for now. Can you run more tests?" Meanwhile, Officer Brennan was feeling the heat. His superiors, worried about potential backlash, were pressuring him to lay low. But Brennan had other plans. He knew Robert was a threat that needed to be neutralized. Captain Oliveira, sensing the gravity of the situation, reached out to Robert. "Dr. Thompson, I've been trying to bring Brennan down for years. What happened to your son? It's not an isolated incident." Robert, still reeling from the attack on Jamal, found himself at a crossroads. His instinct as a father screamed for revenge, but his scientific mind saw an opportunity to uncover something much bigger. "Captain, I think we're dealing with more than just a bad cop. Someone's experimenting with venoms." As Robert delved deeper into his research, connecting with colleagues in toxicology, a pattern began to emerge. There had been other cases, mostly involving children from underprivileged neighborhoods, of strange envenomations that didn't quite fit known species. Maria Johnson, the hot dog vendor, became an unexpected ally. She approached Robert one day in the park, looking over her shoulder nervously. "Dr. Thompson, I've seen things. Brennan, he's not working alone. There's a lab hidden in the old factory district." Robert's investigation led him to Julia Martinez, a brilliant but troubled grad student who had been working on venom research. "Dr. Thompson," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "they approached me months ago, offered me funding, resources. I swear I didn't know they were using it on children." As Robert pieced together the information, a horrifying picture emerged. A secret network of corrupt cops, unethical scientists, and powerful businessmen were using Chicago's most vulnerable children as test subjects for experimental bioweapons. Jamal, showing remarkable resilience, was released from the hospital. But the bright, curious boy was now withdrawn, jumping at shadows. "Dad," he said one night, his voice small, "why did the policeman hurt me? Aren't they supposed to protect us?" Robert's heart broke. He knew then that this wasn't just about justice anymore. It was about restoring his son's faith in the world. Captain Oliveira, working tirelessly, managed to identify several other officers involved in the conspiracy. But every time he thought he was close to a breakthrough, evidence would disappear, witnesses would go silent. Dr. Sarah Lee, analyzing more cases, made another chilling discovery. "Robert, these venoms, they're not just weapons. I think they're trying to create some kind of super soldier serum. The long-term effects on these children could be catastrophic." As Robert's investigation progressed, he found himself being followed. Strange cars parked outside his house. His phone calls seemed to be monitored. The threat was no longer just to Jamal, but to their entire lives. Brennan, feeling cornered, became more erratic. He confronted Robert outside the university. "Back off, Thompson. You have no idea who you're messing with. For your kid's sake, drop it." But Robert wasn't backing down. He had already put measures in place, distributing his findings to trusted colleagues across the country. "If anything happens to me or my son," he told Brennan, "everything comes out." The conflict was escalating rapidly. Robert, once a peaceful academic, found himself learning to shoot, installing security systems, and constantly looking over his shoulder. The scientist in him was still determined to uncover the truth, but the father in him was prepared to do whatever it took to protect Jamal. As tensions rose, Chicago itself seemed to hold its breath. The summer heat bore down on the city, mirroring the intensity of the conflict brewing beneath its surface. In playgrounds and parks, parents held their children closer, eyeing strangers with newfound suspicion. Robert knew he was standing at the precipice of something much larger than he had ever imagined. The choice before him was clear: walk away and try to rebuild a normal life with Jamal, or dive deeper into the abyss, risking everything to expose a conspiracy that reached the highest levels of power in Chicago. With a deep breath, Robert made his decision. There was no turning back now. As Robert delved deeper into the conspiracy, new layers of complexity emerged. Dr. Sarah Lee, investigating hospital records, discovered a pattern of mysterious deaths among homeless people and drug addicts. "Robert," she said, her voice trembling, "I think they're using the most vulnerable as test subjects before moving on to children." Meanwhile, Julia Martinez, racked with guilt over her unwitting role in the experiments, began secretly compiling data on the modified venoms. Her actions didn't go unnoticed. One night, she barely escaped an accident in her lab, making her realize the true danger she was in. Captain Oliveira, following a lead from an anonymous tip, uncovered a connection between the venom experiments and a new drug flooding Chicago's streets. This designer drug, nicknamed Sting, was causing unprecedented overdoses. He suspected it was a byproduct of the venom research, possibly being used to finance the operation. Maria Johnson, the hot dog vendor, became an unexpected hub of information. Her cart's strategic location made her privy to whispered conversations and clandestine meetings. She started keeping a coded journal, documenting suspicious activities in the park. Jamal, still traumatized but slowly recovering, began having vivid nightmares. In his dreams, he saw other children, scared and in pain, in a dark facility. Robert wondered if these were just nightmares, or if his son's subconscious was revealing more about the day of the attack. A new character entered the fray: Congressman William Hawthorne. On the surface, he was a crusader for law and order, but Robert's investigation started to reveal Hawthorne's deep connections to the pharmaceutical companies potentially benefiting from the illegal venom research. Julia, in a moment of clarity, reached out to an old college friend, now working for the FBI. Special Agent Lisa Chen began a covert investigation, carefully navigating the political minefield that surrounded the case. Dr. Lee's research took an unexpected turn when she identified traces of the modified venom in several high-profile athletes. This opened up a new avenue of investigation. Was the venom being used as a performance enhancer in professional sports? Robert, stretching himself thin between his research, protecting Jamal, and unraveling the conspiracy, barely noticed the toll it was taking on his health. His colleagues at the university started to worry about his increasingly erratic behavior and paranoid demeanor. Brennan, feeling the noose tightening, began to consider turning informant to save himself. His late-night meeting with Captain Oliveira was observed by Maria, adding another layer to her already extensive notes. The local media, sensing a big story but missing the full picture, began running sensationalized pieces on a crime wave targeting children. This unintentionally helped the conspirators by misdirecting public attention. Jamal, showing resilience beyond his years, started a support group for kids at his school who had experienced trauma. Unknown to him, this group became a valuable source of information for Robert, as other children shared stories of strange occurrences and unexplained illnesses. A breakthrough came when Julia managed to isolate a unique chemical marker in the modified venom. This discovery could potentially identify anyone who had been in contact with the illegal substances. However, developing a test and administering it citywide would require resources beyond what Robert and his allies had available. Chicago itself became a character in the unfolding drama. The city's history of corruption and resilience provided a backdrop to the current crisis. From the towering skyscrapers to the gritty back alleys, every part of the urban landscape held pieces of the puzzle. As the threads of the conspiracy intertwined, Robert realized that the story was far bigger than just his personal vendetta against Brennan. It was about systemic corruption, the exploitation of the vulnerable, and the moral questions surrounding scientific advancement at any cost. The stage was set for a confrontation that would shake the city to its core. Robert, once a simple academic, now stood at the center of a storm that threatened to either cleanse Chicago of a deep-rooted evil or destroy everything and everyone he held dear. The turning point came on a rain-soaked night in downtown Chicago. Robert, acting on information from Julia, had set up a makeshift lab in an abandoned warehouse. He was close to synthesizing a compound that could neutralize the modified venom and potentially serve as evidence against the conspirators. As thunder rumbled outside, Robert's phone buzzed with an encrypted message from Captain Oliveira. "They're onto us. Brennan's making a move. Get out now." But it was too late. The sound of screeching tires and slamming car doors echoed through the empty street. Brennan, accompanied by a team of corrupt officers and men in suits who were clearly not police, stormed the warehouse. Robert, his heart pounding, quickly initiated the emergency protocol he had prepared. With trembling hands, he sent a mass email containing all his research findings to trusted contacts across the country, including Dr. Sarah Lee, Special Agent Chen, and several investigative journalists. As the intruders bashed through the door, Robert faced a crucial decision. The synthesized compound, his key evidence, sat in a vial on the workbench. He could destroy it to keep it out of their hands or risk everything to preserve it. In that split second, Robert thought of Jamal. His son's future, and the futures of countless other children, hinged on this moment. With a swift motion, he grabbed the vial and swallowed its contents just as Brennan burst into the room, gun drawn. "It's over, Thompson," Brennan snarled. "Where's the evidence?" Robert, feeling the compound burning through his system, managed a defiant smile. It's gone where you can't reach it, Brennan. And soon, everyone will know what you've done." What happened next was a blur of violence and chaos. As Brennan and his men ransacked the lab, destroying equipment and searching for evidence, Robert felt the effects of the compound taking hold. His senses sharpened painfully, every nerve ending on fire. In the midst of the chaos, an unexpected ally emerged. Maria Johnson, who had been tailing Brennan, had alerted Captain Oliveira. The sounds of police sirens pierced the night, sending Brennan and his cohorts into a panic. As Brennan fled, he turned to his men. "Burn it all down, leave no trace." The warehouse was quickly engulfed in flames, with Robert still inside, struggling against the effects of the compound. Outside, a standoff ensued between Captain Oliveira's loyal officers and Brennan's corrupt team. Gunfire erupted, turning the quiet Chicago street into a war zone. Meanwhile, across town, Dr. Sarah Lee received Robert's emergency email. Realizing the gravity of the situation, she immediately began coordinating with hospitals across the city, preparing for potential casualties and gathering medical evidence. Julia, who had been monitoring the situation from a safe house, sprang into action. She contacted Special Agent Chen, providing her with real-time updates and crucial information about the players involved. As the firefight raged outside the burning warehouse, Robert, empowered by the compound but struggling to maintain consciousness, managed to crawl to safety. The world around him was a kaleidoscope of intense sensations, every sound amplified, every touch electric. Captain Oliveira, spotting Robert emerging from the flames, rushed to his aid. "Thompson, what have you done to yourself?" Robert, his eyes blazing with an unnatural light, gripped Oliveira's arm. "It's all inside me now, Captain. The evidence, the cure, everything. We have to end this tonight." The tide of the battle turned with the arrival of FBI reinforcements led by Special Agent Chen. Brennan, realizing he was cornered, took a hostage, a young rookie officer who had been caught in the crossfire. As dawn broke over Chicago, the standoff reached its climax. Robert, his body pushed to its limits by the compound, faced Brennan one last time. "It's over, Mike. Let the kid go. You can't win this." Brennan, desperation etched on his face, made one last attempt to negotiate. "You don't understand, Thompson. This goes higher than you can imagine. People in power, people who can make us all disappear." But Robert stood firm, his resolve unshaken. "Not anymore, Brennan. The truth is out, and it's bigger than all of us now." In a final tense moment, Brennan made his choice. The hostage was released and Brennan surrendered, but not before uttering a chilling warning. "This isn't over, Thompson. You've just opened Pandora's box." As Brennan was led away in handcuffs, Robert collapsed, the strain of the compound finally overwhelming him. The last thing he saw before losing consciousness was the rising sun, casting a new light over the city he had fought so hard to protect. The battle was won, but the war was far from over. Chicago, and indeed the entire nation, was about to face the shocking truth of what had been happening in the shadows. And at the center of it all was Robert, a father who had risked everything to protect his son and uncover the truth. In the days following the warehouse showdown, Chicago was gripped by a storm of revelations and reactions. Robert Thompson, hailed as a hero by some and a vigilante by others, lay in a hospital bed, his body struggling to cope with the effects of the experimental compound he had ingested. Dr. Sarah Lee worked tirelessly, leading a team of specialists to stabilize Robert's condition. His enhanced senses and accelerated healing were both a blessing and a curse, providing valuable data, but putting immense strain on his system. "He's rewriting everything we know about human physiology, Doctor," Lee confided to Captain Oliveira. Jamal, under the protective watch of Julia Martinez, showed remarkable strength. He became a symbol of resilience for other victims, his story inspiring many to come forward. Child psychologists noted the therapeutic effect of Jamal's support group, which had expanded to help children across the city deal with trauma. The media frenzy was unprecedented. Leaked snippets of Robert's research caused a public uproar. Congressman Hawthorne, implicated in the conspiracy, held a tense press conference denying all allegations, but his nervous demeanor only fueled suspicions. Special Agent Chen, now leading a joint FBI local task force, faced an uphill battle. "This goes deeper than we imagined," she told her team. "Every rock we turn over reveals another layer of corruption." Her investigation expanded to include pharmaceutical companies, sports organizations, and even military contractors. Maria Johnson, the unassuming hot dog vendor turned key witness, found herself thrust into the spotlight. Her detailed journals provided crucial evidence, linking seemingly unrelated events into a coherent narrative of corruption. Despite threats to her safety, she stood firm. "I've been silent too long," she told reporters. "It's time for the truth to come out." The police department underwent a severe shake-up. Captain Oliveira, promoted to acting chief, began a comprehensive review of all officers, weeding out those with ties to Brennan's network. The process was painful but necessary, revealing the extent of the corruption that had infested the force. In the scientific community, the revelations sparked intense debate. The potential medical applications of the modified venoms were undeniable, but the ethical implications of their development were troubling. Universities across the country began reviewing their research protocols and funding sources. Julia Martinez, grappling with her role in the events, became an advocate for ethical scientific practices. Her testimony before a Senate Committee on Research Oversight was a powerful indictment of the pressures and temptations faced by young scientists. The city of Chicago itself seemed to be going through a catharsis. Community meetings sprang up in parks and churches, with citizens demanding transparency and accountability from their leaders. The long-ignored voices of marginalized communities were finally being heard. Brennan, awaiting trial, became a pariah even among his former allies. His attempts to bargain for leniency by offering information were met with skepticism. The prosecution, armed with Robert's research and Maria's journals, built a formidable case against him and his co-conspirators. As weeks passed, Robert's condition stabilized, but he was far from normal. His enhanced abilities, while diminishing, persisted. The ethical implications of his self-experimentation were not lost on him. "I've become the very thing I was fighting against," he confided to Dr. Lee. "A human experiment." Jamal's visits to his father's hospital room became a source of both joy and concern. The boy's perceptiveness had sharpened, and he often sensed things before they happened. Robert wondered if his own transformation had somehow affected his son. The national implications of the Chicago scandal grew. Other cities began investigating similar patterns of corruption and experimentation. A Senate hearing was called, promising to delve into the full scope of the conspiracy. As Robert slowly recovered, he faced a dilemma. His actions had exposed a terrible truth and potentially saved countless lives. But at what cost? His relationship with Jamal, his career, his very identity, all had been irrevocably changed. The city held its breath, waiting to see what would emerge from the ashes of the old order. Change was coming, but whether it would be for better or worse remained to be seen. In his hospital room, Robert Thompson, once a simple chemistry professor, now bore the weight of a city's future on his shoulders. As weeks turned into months, Chicago began the arduous process of healing and reformation. Robert Thompson, finally released from the hospital, faced the daunting task of rebuilding his life while grappling with his newfound abilities. The compound had permanently altered Robert's physiology. His senses remained heightened, his reflexes lightning fast. But with these gifts came challenges: overwhelming sensory input, difficulty sleeping, and the constant fear of losing control. Dr. Sarah Lee developed a specialized treatment plan, combining medication, meditation, and rigorous physical training to help Robert manage his condition. Jamal, showing resilience beyond his years, became his father's rock. Their roles had reversed. with the young boy often guiding Robert through sensory overloads or moments of doubt. Their bond deepened, forged in the crucible of their shared trauma and recovery. "Dad," Jamal said one evening, as they sat in their rebuilt home, "you always taught me that with great power comes great responsibility. Now we both have to live up to that." The investigation, led by Special Agent Chen, continued to unravel the vast conspiracy. Each revelation sent shockwaves through the city and beyond. Pharmaceutical executives, high-ranking officials, and even international agents were implicated. The scale of the corruption was staggering, but so was the determination to root it out. Captain Oliveira, now permanently instated as police chief, implemented sweeping reforms in the department. Transparency became the new norm, with community oversight boards and stringent vetting processes for officers. The road was tough, but slowly, trust between the police and the community began to rebuild. Julia Martinez found her calling in ethics advocacy. She traveled to universities across the country, sharing her story and pushing for stricter guidelines in scientific research. Her journey from unwitting participant to vocal activist inspired a new generation of scientists to prioritize ethics over expediency. Maria Johnson, the unlikely hero of the story, used her newfound platform to advocate for overlooked communities. Her hot dog stand became a symbol of grassroots vigilance, and she started a neighborhood watch program that spread throughout Chicago. Robert, struggling to find his place in this new world, eventually returned to teaching. His classes, once focused purely on chemistry, now incorporated discussions on ethics, social responsibility, and the human cost of scientific advancement. Students flocked to his lectures, drawn by his first-hand experience of the power and peril of unchecked research. The city of Chicago itself underwent a transformation. Urban renewal projects, focusing on the neighborhoods most affected by the conspiracy, sprung up. Parks were cleaned up, community centers established, and educational programs implemented. The spirit of renewal was palpable. Congressman Hawthorne and his co-conspirators faced justice in a highly publicized trial. Robert's testimony, combined with the mountain of evidence gathered by Agent Chen's task force, ensured that those responsible were held accountable. The proceedings became a national spectacle, sparking discussions about power, corruption, and redemption. As the trial concluded, Robert faced a personal crossroads. His enhanced abilities, while stabilized, still set him apart. Government agencies, private corporations, and even foreign entities approached him with offers to study or employ his unique skills. The temptation to use his condition for financial gain or further scientific advancement was strong. It was Jamal who once again provided clarity. "Remember why we started this, Dad," he said, wise beyond his years. It was never about being special. It was about doing what's right. Inspired by his son's words, Robert made a decision that would define the next chapter of his life. He established the Thompson Foundation for Ethical Scientific Advancement. The foundation's mission was twofold: to support victims of unethical experimentation and to promote responsible scientific research. The foundation quickly gained support from ethical scientists, reformed pharmaceutical companies, and a public eager for positive change. Robert's unique perspective as both a scientist and a victim made him a powerful advocate for balancing progress with ethics. As the first anniversary of the Scorpion incident approached, Chicago prepared for a day of remembrance and hope. The renovated Lincoln Park, once the site of Jamal's traumatic experience, was chosen for the ceremony. Standing at the podium with Jamal by his side, Robert addressed the gathered crowd and the cameras broadcasting nationwide. "A year ago, we stood on the brink of an abyss, our city wounded by corruption and our faith in humanity shaken. But today, we stand here not as victims, but as survivors, as reformers, as a community united in its commitment to justice, ethics, and the betterment of all. Our scars remind us of our past, but they do not define our future. Together, we have the power to ensure that science serves humanity, not the other way around. This is not the end of our journey, but a new beginning. A beginning where every child can play in our parks without fear, where every scientist can pursue knowledge with integrity, and where every citizen can trust in the systems meant to protect them. This is our city, our future, and together we will make it bright. As applause erupted, Robert hugged Jamal tightly, feeling for the first time in a long while that the future, despite its challenges, held more promise than peril. In the months following the public ceremony, Robert and his allies worked tirelessly to prepare for what they knew would be the final confrontation with the remnants of the conspiracy. Despite the high-profile arrests and convictions, intelligence gathered by Agent Chen suggested that a core group of powerful individuals had managed to evade justice. Robert, his abilities now finely tuned through Dr. Lee's specialized training, spent long nights in his lab. He was developing a groundbreaking detection system that could identify traces of the modified venom in the human body, even months after exposure. This technology would be crucial in identifying both victims and perpetrators who had slipped through the cracks. Jamal, wise beyond his years, took on the role of his father's moral compass. He often sat in the lab, asking probing questions that forced Robert to consider the ethical implications of each decision. "Dad," he would say, "remember why we're doing this. It's not about revenge anymore." Agent Chen, working closely with the reformed Chicago PD under Chief Oliveira's leadership, pieced together a complex network of shell companies and offshore accounts. The trail led to a shadowy organization with tentacles reaching into the highest levels of government and industry. Julia Martinez, leveraging her scientific expertise and newfound activist platform, worked on decoding the encrypted research files recovered from the raid on Brennan's operation. Each breakthrough brought them closer to understanding the full scope of the venom experiments. Maria Johnson's grassroots network proved invaluable. Her connections in every neighborhood of Chicago provided a constant stream of information about suspicious activities and potential hideouts of the remaining conspirators. As the team worked, they became aware that they were in a race against time. Whispers in the underworld, picked up by Maria's network, suggested that the remnants of the conspiracy were planning one final, desperate move to destroy evidence and eliminate witnesses. Robert, feeling the weight of responsibility, struggled with the temptation to push his enhanced abilities to their limits. The compound in his system offered tantalizing possibilities: superhuman strength, incredible mental acuity, but at what cost? Dr. Lee warned him of the potential for burnout or worse if he overexerted himself. The turning point came when an encrypted message was intercepted by Agent Chen's team. It contained details of a meeting, a gathering of the conspiracy's top echelon, including figures who had so far remained in the shadows. The location, an abandoned industrial complex on the outskirts of Chicago. With this information, the team knew they had to act fast. Chief Oliveira mobilized his most trusted officers, while Agent Chen brought in an elite FBI tactical unit. Julia worked around the clock to finalize a neutralizing agent for the venom in case they encountered any weaponized versions. Robert faced a difficult decision. His presence at the raid could be crucial, given his unique abilities and intimate knowledge of the venom. But it would also put him in extreme danger, risking leaving Jamal without a father. After a long, heartfelt conversation with his son, Robert made his choice. "I have to go, Jamal. To finish this, to make sure you and every other child can grow up in a safer world." Jamal, tears in his eyes but determination in his voice, replied, "I know, Dad. Just promise you'll come back." As the day of the raid approached, tension mounted. Robert, Dr. Lee, Julia, and Agent Chen worked on finalizing their strategy. Chief Oliveira prepared his officers, emphasizing the importance of this mission for the future of Chicago. Maria Johnson, in a surprising turn of events, volunteered to help. Her unassuming appearance and knowledge of the city's layout made her an ideal scout. Despite protests from the others, she insisted, "I've been a part of this from the beginning. I need to see it through." On the eve of the operation, Robert stood at the window of his home, looking out over the city he had fought so hard to protect. He felt the weight of the vial in his pocket, a concentrated dose of the compound that had changed him, a last resort he hoped he wouldn't have to use. As dawn broke over Chicago, the team gathered for one final briefing. The air was thick with anticipation and fear. They all knew that by the end of the day, the fate of the city, and perhaps the country, would be decided. Robert took a deep breath, looked at each of his allies and said, "Whatever happens today, remember, we're not just fighting against something. We're fighting for a future where science serves humanity, not the other way around. Let's finish this." With determined nods, the team moved out, ready to face whatever challenges awaited them at the industrial complex. The final battle was about to begin. The dawn sky was tinged with an ominous red as Robert and his team approached the abandoned industrial complex. Agent Chen's FBI unit secured the perimeter, while Chief Oliveira's reformed police force established a command center nearby. Robert, his senses hyper-alert, led the way with Julia and Dr. Lee close behind. As they entered the vast, rusted structure, the air grew thick with tension. Robert's enhanced hearing picked up faint echoes of movement deep within the complex. "They're here," he whispered, "and they're expecting us." Suddenly, alarms blared. The complex came alive with flashing lights and the sound of heavy machinery. "It's a trap!" Agent Chen yelled through the comms. Chaos erupted as armed guards emerged from hidden alcoves, opening fire on the team. Robert's reflexes, honed by months of training, allowed him to dodge the initial barrage. He quickly formulated a plan. "Julia, Dr. Lee, find the main lab. Destroy everything. Chen, Oliveira, keep them occupied. I'm going after the leaders." As the others engaged in fierce combat throughout the complex, Robert used his enhanced abilities to navigate through the labyrinth of catwalks and machinery. His goal, the control room where he sensed the conspiracy's masterminds were hiding. Meanwhile, Julia and Dr. Lee fought their way to the heart of the facility. What they found there chilled them to the bone. Rows of tanks filled with a sickly green liquid, each containing unconscious human subjects. "My God!" Julia gasped. "They're still experimenting." Outside, Maria Johnson's knowledge of the area proved invaluable. She guided reinforcements through back alleys and secret entrances, turning the tide of the battle in their favor. Robert, nearing the control room, found himself face to face with a familiar figure, Congressman Hawthorne. The politician's eyes gleamed with an unnatural light, his movements unnaturally fast. "Welcome, Dr. Thompson," he sneered. "Care to see what your research has truly accomplished?" With inhuman speed, Hawthorne attacked. Robert, despite his own enhancements, found himself on the defensive. As they fought, Hawthorne revealed the true extent of the conspiracy. "We're not just changing individuals, Thompson. We're evolving humanity itself." In the lab, Julia made a horrifying discovery. The latest batch of the venom was designed to be airborne, capable of affecting entire populations. Dr. Lee worked frantically to neutralize it, while Julia defended her from waves of attackers. Chief Oliveira and Agent Chen, fighting back-to-back, slowly pushed towards the center of the complex. Their teamwork was a testament to the new era of cooperation between local and federal law enforcement. Robert, battered and bleeding, realized he was outmatched by Hawthorne's advanced enhancements. In a desperate move, he reached for the vial in his pocket, the concentrated compound he'd hoped never to use. "Jamal, forgive me," he whispered and injected himself. The effect was immediate and overwhelming. Robert's senses exploded into overdrive, time seeming to slow around him. With newfound strength, he turned the tables on Hawthorne, driving him back. In the lab, Julia and Dr. Lee faced a critical decision. The only way to destroy the airborne venom was to trigger the facility's self-destruct sequence, but that would mean sacrificing themselves. They shared a look of understanding and nodded. Julia began the countdown. Outside, Maria noticed a group of conspirators attempting to flee with hard drives and documents. Using her street smarts, she orchestrated a brilliant maneuver with the police to cut them off, securing crucial evidence. Robert, his body burning with the compound's power, finally overpowered Hawthorne. As he stood over the defeated congressman, Robert faced a moral crossroads. The urge to end Hawthorne's life warred with the ethical principles he'd fought so hard to uphold. In that moment of hesitation, Hawthorne reached for a hidden switch. "If I'm going down, I'm taking you all with me," he snarled, activating the facility's meltdown sequence. Alarms blared throughout the complex. Agent Chen's voice crackled over the comms. "Everyone out now! This place is going to blow!" Robert, his mind racing faster than ever, realized the disaster about to unfold. The explosion would release the airborne venom into Chicago. In a split-second decision, he used his enhanced strength to rip out the control panel, manually overriding the meltdown to contain the blast. "Chen, get everyone out! I'll hold it as long as I can," Robert yelled, his muscles straining against the machine. As the complex shuddered around them, the team evacuated. Julia and Dr. Lee, having destroyed the venom samples, were the last to leave, dragging an unconscious Hawthorne with them. Robert, his body pushed beyond its limits, felt the compound burning through his system. As the facility began to collapse, he thought of Jamal, of the future they'd fought for. With one last surge of strength, he contained the blast and ran. The explosion rocked the industrial district, a plume of smoke rising into the dawn sky. As the dust settled, the team looked on in horror, fearing the worst for Robert. Then, from the wreckage, a figure emerged. Robert, battered and barely conscious, stumbled towards them. As he collapsed into Dr. Lee's arms, he managed a weak smile. "It's over," he whispered. "We did it." The battle was won. But the war against corruption and unethical science was far from over. As sirens wailed in the distance and the first rays of sunlight broke through the smoke, Robert and his team stood at the precipice of a new chapter in their lives and in the history of Chicago. In the weeks following the dramatic showdown at the industrial complex, Chicago underwent a profound transformation. The exposure of the conspiracy's full extent sent shockwaves through the nation, triggering a wave of reforms and investigations across the country. Robert Thompson, hailed as a hero by many, faced a long road to recovery. The final dose of the compound had pushed his body to its absolute limits. Under Dr. Lee's care, he slowly regained his strength, though the long-term effects of his transformation remained uncertain. The Thompson Foundation for Ethical Scientific Advancement became a beacon of hope and a watchdog for responsible research. With Julia Martinez at the helm of its scientific division, the foundation worked tirelessly to help victims of unethical experiments and to promote transparency in scientific endeavors. Agent Chen's meticulous investigation, bolstered by the evidence recovered from the industrial complex, led to a series of high-profile arrests and convictions. The reach of the conspiracy, extending to corporate boardrooms and the halls of government, ensured that the legal proceedings would continue for years to come. Chief Oliveira's reformed police department became a model for community-oriented policing nationwide. The trust rebuilt between law enforcement and Chicago's citizens proved to be one of the most lasting and impactful outcomes of the entire ordeal. Maria Johnson, the unassuming hot dog vendor turned local hero, used her newfound influence to advocate for overlooked communities. Her grassroots network evolved into a powerful force for positive change in Chicago's neighborhoods. Jamal, showing wisdom beyond his years, became a symbol of resilience for children across the city. His support group expanded into a nationwide program helping young people deal with trauma and advocate for their rights. As for Congressman Hawthorne and his co-conspirators, they faced justice in a series of highly publicized trials. Their downfall served as a stark reminder of the consequences of prioritizing power and profit over human lives. 6 months after the final confrontation, a fully recovered Robert stood at the podium in a rebuilt Lincoln Park. Surrounded by his allies and with Jamal by his side, he addressed a crowd of thousands. A year ago, we stood here in the shadow of corruption and fear. Today, we stand in the light of truth and hope. Our city has been through a crucible, but we've emerged stronger, more united and more committed to justice than ever before. The path forward isn't easy. We must remain vigilant against those who would abuse power and sacrifice ethics for gain. But we've shown that when we stand together, scientists, law enforcement, community leaders, and everyday citizens, we can overcome any challenge. Let Chicago be an example to the world. Let our story show that it's possible to pursue scientific advancement while holding firm to our humanity, that it's possible to heal deep wounds and rebuild trust, that in the face of darkness we can choose to be the light. Our work isn't done, but today we celebrate how far we've come. And tomorrow we'll continue to build a future where every child can play without fear, where science serves humanity, and where justice prevails. This is our city. This is our future. And together we will make it bright. As applause erupted and the sun shone brightly over Chicago, Robert hugged Jamal tightly. They had been through hell, but they had emerged not just survivors, but beacons of hope for a better tomorrow. 1 year after the Lincoln Park speech, Chicago had become a model of urban renewal and ethical governance. Robert, now balancing his roles as scientist, father, and public figure, continued to advocate for responsible research. Jamal, thriving in school, led a nationwide youth empowerment program. The Thompson Foundation expanded globally, influencing science policies worldwide. Agent Chen, promoted to a key FBI position, spearheaded initiatives against corruption. Chief Oliveira's community policing methods were adopted by cities across America. As Robert watched Jamal play safely in the park that once held such terror, he reflected on their journey. The scars remained, but they had built something beautiful from the ashes of conspiracy. Hey everyone, if you've made it this far, you've just experienced an incredible journey with us. This story shows how the courage of a few can change the lives of many. What would you do in a situation like this? How can we stay vigilant and protect our communities? Leave your thoughts in the comments and don't forget to write, "I watched until the end," to show you're part of this fight for justice. Share this video with friends and family. Together, we can make a difference. And don't miss our next video, where we'll explore more stories of overcoming adversity and courage. Click the video appearing on screen now to continue this amazing journey.